Welcome back to the channel, guys. Good to see you guys. Doing a little live action here. Put your comments in the box. I'll try to read your comments because I noticed on the replays that the comments don't show in the videos. So, I need to redo my studio a little bit and figure out how to make that happen. But nonetheless, I want to jump on here and discuss something I've been learning lately, which is Harry Dent's 250-year revolutionary demographics cycle. So if you guys haven't taken a look at Harry Dent stuff and you're a millennial and you're in my demographic and you guys follow this channel, you're probably in the category that Harry Dent is a freaking lunatic, that he's crazy, that he doesn't know what he's talking about, that he's an old boomer. And I do love this boomer conversation between the millennials and the boomers because this is the divide. But Dent has a very good point. And if you look at any of Dent's material, Dent is in the world of demographics. He lives in that world. I think that there's a few predictions he has out there that are a little insane, but his big one is that he looks at everything in demographics in cycles. And he starts at a 250-year revolutionary cycle. He's got a 90-year cycle, basically a stock market cycle, if you will. He's got bottoming cycles. He's got technology cycles, and these cycles stack in a way where he puts together his theory, if you will. Clean cut. Good to see you, man. Good to see you in the room. So nonetheless, I've been diving into this because about a year ago it became apparent to me, but definitely like 3 months ago, where it was like, this is seriously real, where I was like, this is actually happening. We're in a cycle where it is very likely that the outcome of the events to come will lead to a completely decentralized future. One of two possibilities is probably the most likely: an extremely centralized future or an extremely decentralized future where we have like different laptops and like chips running nodes, doing cryptocurrency transactions, peer-to-peer, and people trading real assets live time with no stops and no manipulations and all of those type of crazy things. And or we'll end up in kind of a similar to what we already have, but maybe people will be more aware that they're obviously slaves to the system. But ultimately, like, where we're headed is into two different economies. One where we have like this virtual digital crypto economy, and then two where we have like this fiat, also virtual economy, but very like fiat in nature, like everything about it is fake. And the fiat currencies have this sort of control over the real assets, if you will. Like, how would you buy Exxon stock? Like, you're going to take your fiat currencies, you're going to get a check from a customer, cash from a customer, a credit card from a customer. You're going to then, the only, none of those involve a non-third party. So each one of those transactions is like, okay, I have cash. Cool. What do I do with this cash? If I want to buy Exxon stock, well, it's got to go to the bank, right? Like, it's got to go to the bank. Or I get a check. Well, it's got to go to the bank. Well, cash clears faster than check. Well, that's cool. Either way, I have to probably physically take it to the bank. Well, check is more convenient because I can take a picture of it, and then a day later or maybe 7 days later, depending on the size of the check, or maybe it's too big and I have to take it to the bank again. But at some point in time, but not now, that money will become mine, but not really, because it's not really money. It's completely fake, and it's not really mine because it's in somebody else's bank, which I don't own, which will more than likely fail because they don't have any reserves in the banks. They've loaned them all out into this crazy economy that we're now seeing. So what happens when these banks fail? The FDIC bails them out, not really because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but ultimately the FDIC is insuring less than 2% of all deposits in all American bank accounts. So just, be aware of that. I'm sure that if there were bank runs or bank failures, they would just print the currency, and thus it's fiat currency. So they'll just print it, debase it, charge everybody, and or they'll do what Cyprus did in 2013, and they'll do a bank bail-in, not a bank bail-out, where it's just like everyone's bank accounts just gets evened up. It's kind of like being like in the class and like everyone, you just take the grade point average and be like, that's everybody's grade. Cyprus did something similar to this. Or the trust will be broken in the banking system, and people will go, well, this system's kind of fiat, like it's completely fiat. The money's fake, the banking system's fake, the transactions involve all these third-party risks. The other option that we didn't even go down is like you get a credit card, so now Visa's involved in your transaction, and they charge you 3%, and then also it goes to your BB&T or SunTrust, and now they merge to be formed Trusty or whatever, Truist or some bullshit, and it's like I don't. This entire system is is flawed in many ways because now I have Visa involved in my transaction, but now I have SunTrust involved in my transaction, and we know those guys are not like the everyday person, right? And so there's all these type of issues in the financial system, and everybody getting their hands involved in that. And then just to finish my example of trying to buy Exxon stock, now I have to go and find a broker, and then I want to go buy Exxon stock. And so at the end of the day, I finally have an equity stake in something real that has like trucks and pipelines and welders and acetylene tanks and personnel and patents and cash flow and reserves and like real stuff. And but the entire process there is like not a smooth transaction, and it's certainly not open to everybody, and it involves all these different third parties. And so ultimately the future is probably more like a peer-to-peer type of situation using probably an older laptop because they can be everywhere, and these things will basically format to be like nodes, and then they'll be doing these transactions. The question is in that, what is the role of government? Like, where does the government, where do they have a role? And I would say that this is interesting with Dent's 250-year revolutionary cycles, because if we were to go back 500 years in time, I guess longer than that, but roughly 500 years in time, we find ourselves in that Martin Luther revolution. So not like the black guy Martin Luther, like the actual legit older school Martin Luther, the Protestant that basically put on the Catholic churches. He basically framed up a constitution, if you will. He wrote something down and he nailed it to the door of the Catholic Church, which was like a punishable sin at that point in time, where you could just be burned at the stake because the church just ran the game. Like if you were a priest, you were like, I don't like that guy, burn him at the stake. Yeah, I don't like him. He doesn't have that. He's got something. The Lord doesn't like him either. Burn him at the stake. And so eventually people were like, yeah, we need a separation of like church and state. Like that, we should separate that. Like the king shouldn't be the priest and the priest shouldn't be the king. And so they separated that. And then eventually 250 years later in the 1770s, you end up like over here in North America, you end up with this revolutionary war with the old, king, if you will, King James, where we're like, yeah, we don't really want to do this monarchy thing. We kind of want to do like for the people, by the people thing. And we're just going to split ways. And of course, there's this nasty war, as there normally is in these events, and that happens, right? So now you have this separation of like king and government, separation of state and church. However, now we have this state and money problem, right? Like where state is married to the currency because it's not real money. It's married to the currency, and they just print it at will. They grow. They don't really produce anything. They go around like thugs and steal from everybody that's productive, and then they just tax, quote, the rich, but the rich don't pay taxes. So it's completely hilarious statement. People that work and earn money pay taxes. People that own assets and their assets earn money, they pay less taxes. That's why you don't want to work for money. You want to have money work for you. But people are waking up to this. And so the fact that people are waking up to this makes me extremely optimistic, where it's like, I think that we're going to go through a period of time, and I don't think it'll be without incident or completely peaceful, where we are definitely have an opportunity to see the separation of state and money, or potentially the complete disembodiment of state. It's not unrealistic at this point in time to think that the US of A can't just break up. Like that Texas and Louisiana and Oklahoma can't just go their own way. And that Florida and maybe Georgia, but screw Georgia. Let's just go Florida because we don't need anything. We're good. Like Florida could secede from the Union at any point in time and we'd be completely fine. In fact, I would argue that our capita, our GDP per capita, and our net worth per capita, that is like the wealth of the average citizen, how well they live, I would argue would probably 2 to 5x if we were to break off from the United States. I don't think that there would be any like consequences really to that. I think that like we'd be Like we wouldn't have these income taxes. We could do a flat tax. We have like great water. We have like abundant solar and water and like natural resources and plenty of land and like population of people from around the world that want to move here because the weather's good, the beaches are good, and like there's common sense. And so, things like this are not off the table during this type of period of time, during one of these 250-year revolutions. What's unique about this 250-year revolution, which is why these revolutions come, is we're stacking on top of a technology cycle, which Dent refers to as being like a 40-year, 45-year period of time, and a long-term debt cycle, which is a 90-year period of time. Think 1929 to 2019. Like that would be your 90-year window, right? And so what happened in 2019? Well, the repo market September 18th, 19th of 2019 dried up. And I told you guys on my Instagram, Onsite Trav, I was like, yo, guys, the repo market dried up. What this means is like big banks or big companies that float cash between one another, like the interest rate, the overnight funds rate went to 10%, which basically means like if you had payroll, you're Walmart, you got to make payroll, you got to pay, Heinz, and you got to pay like Fruit of the Loom, for all the underwear you've been selling, like, and you need to just float some cash. You go to the repo market because you're floating like 50 million bucks. Well, the interest rate went to 10% overnight, and there was like this big issue in the repo market. Federal Reserve came in, printed $1 trillion. First time we'd ever heard the word $1 trillion. If we weren't talking about the national debt, $1 trillion. They were like, yo, we're going to backstop this problem. We're going to inject liquidity. 4 months later, you get this big pandemic because the Federal Reserve needed this. Like they needed an event where they could just print liquidity. And now we're at this point where like, they're just going to print the currency. Like they're going to just go print it away. Like it's pretty evident to like any Joe Blow out there where it's like, they're just going to print this way. What's interesting is if you guys follow Harry Dent, many millennials I know won't, because he's a boomer and he's a little crazy. But Dent has this big theory on we're just going to see this crazy deflationary event. Like they've hyped it, right? The value of a dollar has lost so much. It takes all these dollars now to buy an ounce of gold, all these dollars now to get an ounce of silver. When back in the day, like a dollar was an ounce of silver, right? Like they just printed it, stolen it. As technology has made things more abundant, made things more deflationary, they've just printed the purchasing power of this currency away, and everybody's forced to use it, except now they're not, which is pretty freaking amazing. And it's like they're waking up to the fact that like it's actually a bitch to use fiat currency. Like it's write a check, to get a credit card, like to process with it, then to pay taxes on it. It's a bitch. And it's like easier to use the blockchain. And so it's like, well, what's the value of like cryptocurrencies? Well, like what's the value of all the banks, all the financial institutions? And if you want to, throw your broker in there too. Take the market cap of that and divide it by like your favorite crypto projects. And like, there it is. That's the market cap. And so like the answer is like right there. Like the solution to like a more abundant and like open future to where like things are not like things are known. Like we don't have to hide things. Like can we audit the Federal Reserve? The answer is hell no. You're not allowed to audit the Federal Reserve. Should we be allowed to? Hell yeah, there should have been an audit like Fort Knox. Is there any gold in there? We should freaking find out, but like we don't know, right? Blockchains do in many ways solve these problems. So I'm extremely optimistic to it about what could happen here and what is going to happen here. So my short message to you in a long format, 13 minutes in here is if you want to play this event, one, figure out how to survive it, because understand your supply chains, your traditional supply chains. Like, are you going to get avocados and you're part of the world in January? I don't know. Okay. Now, typically, yes. Back in last 10, 20 years, yes. Over the next 5 or 10 years, the answer might be depends, right? What's the cost of those avocados? Who knows, right? Probably higher. But then if you have this big stock market crash and you have like all of this value that just leaves the system in a crash, all of this debt that just leaves the system in a major bankruptcy crash, which is all inevitably going to happen at some point in time because of the actions of our government, local, state, and federal, and worldwide. So this is going to happen on a huge epic scale. To like Dent's credit, he's like, it's like a $240 trillion of debt in the system to run an $80 trillion global economy. And when that debt comes out of the system, boom, deflation. And then, governments will print their currencies away and then they'll reinflate, or who knows what they're going to do. But ultimately, they're probably going to do what they've always done, which is just going to be print. Like instead of do things the right way, they're just going to print until they can't print anymore, and then they'll have to do things the right way and or start a war. And so that's kind of where we're at, except all the people are home communicating ideas, except now they're all realizing that they can't really communicate their own ideas unless, like Google approves it, or Mark Zuckerberg approves it, or whoever approves of their free speech, which kind of makes sense because private companies. But there's this moment in time where people are realizing not only is the blockchain, like peer-to-peer finance and DeFi, going to change the game, but like decentralized video sharing is about to change the game. Facebook is about to be completely useless. Google, even, which is like, Jeff Bezos says is like the mountain. Think of Google as a mountain. You can climb it, but you can't move it. What if like we just don't need it anymore? Like, what if you have this decentralized project called the Graph, and everyone's using like their own personal computers, and they're all running a blockchain algorithm, and they're all just scouring the web, grabbing data, putting it into the blockchain, and when someone wants to search the blockchain or search for that data, they're like, boom, up, go through the Graph blockchain, there it is, right? And it's like, don't need Google, right? You don't need any of that stuff. I see Theta in the comments there. I see another couple things about BTC and whatnot. I'm gonna get to the comments here in a second, but like that's what's happening, and like that's where we're going. Also, why I've got this MacBook out here, and I've got these screwdrivers, and I've got some RAM and whatnot, because I'm about to run this old school Mac. It's like one of the last ones you can crack. I'm about to crack this up the drives and up the storage in it, run on Linux, because Linux is the past and the future, in my opinion. Everything cool that I'm watching right now that I want to do seems to be on the Linux operating system. Seems to be something no one knows or knows how to use, but you can use on any device, and you don't need the latest and greatest. And Starlink will run Linux because that's what you're going to run in space. Like it just, so things like that. So nonetheless, let me roll through these questions. Was getting word about you may have been booted from your past streams while working. So I've been doing less social media because just a lot of different reasons. But like one, I think that these events are seriously real, which for me is like off-grid house, like solar on that house, food forest, like et cetera, like that. I'm not like a crazy prepper, but like this, you're not going to see a 250-year revolution and just go to the store the next day like it was nothing. So that's when that became apparent to me at the end of 2020 that like, yep, this is actually going to happen. Like I thought for a minute with the lockdowns, I'm like, okay, they're kidding. Okay, they're joking. All right, they'll try this for 3 weeks. Oh, wow, they're 6 months in, 9 months in, and they're holding. Holy cow, they really are going to nosedive the global economy. Supply chain break down. It's not just the price of 2x4s that go through the roof. It's going to be everything that goes through the roof, why the currency is losing value. It's going to be interesting stuff. And so I haven't been booted by anything. Well, to my knowledge, you can get shadow banned anywhere. But like that's the opportunity and that's the problem to solve, right? Is like how do you solve getting like canceled? Just solve the freaking problem. And once you solve the problem, then people that cancel, they can't cancel anymore. And so what's about to happen is like we're just gonna solve these problems. Like a year ago in March, I was super pessimistic about like with the stock market crash, and I was like, this summer and I were making a funny video like, how low can it go on the day on March 23rd? But I was like, imagine this is gonna be like 1929 with millennials. And I started making fun of them on their Netflix accounts. Like, is my Netflix gonna go down? And then sure enough, like 2 days later, I found an article like Netflix is having problems with streaming because everybody's home, right? And so it's like, yeah, all of the systems are gonna break down. Right? All of them are going to break down, and we've got an entire generation of people that are equipped to basically do absolutely nothing. But I do believe that they're adaptable. And I do believe that this generation of people are equipped to do nothing, but they're also equipped to do nothing inside of a system that they didn't build and kind of sucks. And like it's completely unneeded. Like if you think about just the concept of a large company in office space, that's dead. You don't need that. Even Twitter works from home now, and Twitter shadow bans anyone they want. They work from home. They don't need offices. So like all of this stuff is amazingly deflationary because I don't see why I need to pay a kid 120 grand if he lives in Manhattan versus paying the exact same talent and kid $45 or $50,000 if he happens to live in Louisiana. Right? Same talent, same job. As long as he can telecommute, same thing. So what happens to like that big fat salary and all the things that he was spending money on? Gone. Right. So Dent has this amazing point. And so the future could be more deflationary than we think. But I'm very optimistic that deflationary currencies are going to be the result of the final results of this event. Let's put it that way. I think that the final results of this event will probably yield themselves into deflationary currencies, which means as you save, that currency or money becomes harder and harder and harder to obtain. So it increases in value. Meanwhile, technology drops the cost of goods and services so that your currency is always going to buy you more goods and services. And the system just can kind of grow like that. Instead, the elites grab all that as the technology is bringing the cost of things down. It's really not. It's kind of like staying right here. But technology is forcing it down, but they're just skimming off the top and pulling it back up, skimming off the top, printing extra currency for themselves, devaluing your currency so you can buy the same technology at the same price and be like, oh, my cell phone bill is about the same. Right? It's pretty, it's about the same. But like, is it though? Like, is $100 a month like appropriate to spend on an iPhone that fully tracks you everywhere you go and kind of sucks anyway? Like $10 a month, like $11 a month. If I got service everywhere, if I have no service somewhere, maybe $7.99. Right? Like, there's just things like that. But then you look at it and you're like, man, if it's just running on a satellite, right? Just run on like a Linux on a Starlink satellite. Do you need AT&T? Do you need Comcast? What happens to those stock prices? What happens to all those jobs? What happens to all those vans they own? Price of vans go down, right? Because they're selling a lot of vans. Because there are parts of that communication grid where you need physical things. You need physical units. But ultimately, there are leapfrogs that occur. And when somebody like Elon puts Starlink out, and like people can just go off Starlink and it's slow, but it's not, because it gets faster and faster as technology gets better and better. Just leapfrog these entire old systems. My concern is, as these old systems start to break down, what is going to occur as these people that produce absolutely nothing? They're just government thugs. They produce zero. What are they going to do when they become absolutely useless in the future and everyone now knows, like, we don't need you anymore? Right? Like Governor Cuomo in the state of New York. Do you need Cuomo? You don't need Cuomo. You do better without Cuomo. Do you need a governor in the state of New York? Can you guys just go on your own phones and do your peer-to-peer token blockchain exchanges and do your own like voting? And like, if you have to sign in with your face on your phone, isn't that good enough for voting? Why do you need a governor? Right? Why do you need these type of things that are set up from the old world that you probably just don't need now? Right? So I see one from Brian here, Cessna Adventure. Let me get to that. Good to see you too, Brian. Miss you. We will see inflation, deflation at the same time in different sectors and industry. Allocating assets is a skill. All right. So allocating assets, juggling is a skill that people need to thrive. So so what Brian's getting to there, because Brian can be well endowed in literature. All right. So Brian's a great writer. But comments, Brian, got to keep them small. But yeah, we're going to see deflation. We're going to see inflation in different sectors, 100%. And that's going to be freaking gnarly. I think at the end of this, though, like the millennials could just sidestep the baby boomers. Like, I don't want their $30 trillion in national debt. I don't want their Social Security, and I don't want to pay their Social Security. Why don't we just leave? Why don't we just leave the freaking system? Like, start paying your employees in Litecoin, and like start asking your customers, be like, yo, I mean, I can charge you for a check, but it's going to be 50% more. I can charge you in cash, but it's going to be 40% more. Or you can pay me Bitcoin, Litecoin, Digibyte, Zcash, Monero, any of those type of currencies that are just like, they're fixed. There's a fixed amount of supply. The transaction costs are zero. I can track perfectly what I spend and who I spend it to and where I spend it and when I spend it. And all of that is just like record kept for me and like just computed. And I don't have to deal with doing taxes at the end of the year. I just hit a button. It's just like done. It's just overwritten done. Right? And just sidestep that entire system. You don't need the banks. You don't need the Wall Street. Well, you kind of need Wall Street if you want to buy equities. But like at some point here, companies are just going to tokenize, and you're just going to be able to go to their website and buy their tokens and exchange them for your Litecoin, your Bitcoin, your Zcash, your Monero. Because I'm telling you guys, like, Monero is the gangster currency of the future. Like, the real gangsters will all request Monero. That's the stuff you need to own. Bitcoin, and then of course, like, your commodities, like your silvers and golds. I'm more optimistic about silver, but like ultimately, what's the role for politicians, banksters, fraudsters? What's their role? And so my pessimism is that they'll probably do what they've historically always done every time there's been a fourth turning like this, where they'll just get violent, which is what they'll do. They'll just get violent. Although at this point in time, I don't know if it's going to work well for them. because I do feel like the average American dude at this point in time is just like, I need an excuse right now. Like that's kind of feel like that's where we're sitting. It's just like the average dude is just sitting there going like, I just need a fucking excuse. Like if I could get a good, genuine, like good fucking excuse, this story would be well worth living through. And I think that's right where we're at. And so we're right at that spot where like the trust in these institutions is like paper thin on ice. I already don't trust them. I'm out on like all of those things. I'm like out on like so much stuff. Like the only thing I'm not out right now is like solar. I'm about to be out. I'm out on like everything. And you want to position yourself and your investments to be on the flip side of that coin, because either way, that thing's going to land. I don't know how much violence is going to happen in between, but at the end of the day, that coin's going to flip. In between now and 2025, 2035 for sure, we're going to be in a new age, like where you got robo-taxis rolling around, Uber's gone, or they got in the electric car business, but they probably got beat by somebody who was in the electric car business. Those things are charging on renewables. The world is pretty crazy. And at the same time, we have this dystopian because we've impoverished and enslaved a certain sect of the entire world's population all the way down the supply chains. But I'm optimistic that certain currencies, like certain digital currencies, can absolutely free and lift these people. And so I just don't know what the role of their local and state and country type of entity governments is at that point in time when the people are pretty much true to be free. So I don't know. So last two comments and we'll wrap. Good to see you guys. See as well, new constitution, new monetary policy, probably North American Union next. See, here's the thing. I don't think that the solution here is nation states. I don't think that that's the way to go here. I think the way to go here is like, organizing the smallest communities possible and maybe have alliances. But ultimately, free trade is an alliance. It's in everybody's best interest to get along. And so you need some sort of way to have court systems, if you will, but like smart contracts solve that, right? Like we can just do, like when you dive into that world of what's happening there in the decentralized finance space, DeFi, decentralized finance is something I've been watching since 2011. And at that point, it was just Bitcoin, and it was $3 a coin. My roommates would have to go, it was sketchy to get it back then, or you'd mine it on your laptop. But like now there's this entire world where like you're going to be able to sell digital art and make like 4 or 5 copies available or 50 copies available and change the price. And it's going to become store holds of value. And you're going to be able to move it like anywhere in the world by encrypting it. It's pretty gnarly. And like the fiat system's not even recognizing this. We have a Congress and House of Representatives. Like they're not even recognizing what's happening here. And at the same time, we've got this situation where like Twitter can cancel the president's account if they want to. Like, what's the solution to that? Decentralized video sharing, content sharing. Ultimately, at the end of all of that, everybody owning their own node, which is their own server or their own website, if you will, which is run on their own equipment that hosts everything they need. Their crypto wallets, their accounting, all their stuff, their photos and their content and other financial stuff, all that stuff is just going to be on their own little node server type of situation. That's pretty much end game. And it's like fully decentralized. And then at that point in time, it's just like, it's a new world. Like it's a totally new world. And so that's what I see happening. But I think from here to there could be gooey. And very last comment there, with digital currency, I guess what I don't understand is if the power is cut, grid shut down or collapse, what would you do? 100% point, Logan. 100% point. That's going to happen. I mean, I think it's going to happen. When the power comes back on, the grid is back on, the net is back on, you still have your coins, especially if you have them in cold storage, which is a whole nother subject, whole nother video. Maybe those currencies from the old days, post or pre-blackout, because I think they'll call this event the blackout or the Stone Ages. I just read a good book called The Mandibles. They referred to this period. It was like 2025, 2027. The internet went down. And they referred to it, they're looking at this in the 2030s in this bad fictional novel of like the world collapses. At least the US does, because the world just shuns us. But anyway, you might have new digital currencies. A digital currency has its value based on the buy-in, based on the network. Do you want to be part of the Facebook network? I don't, right? But do you want to be part of the Bitcoin network? Yeah. Do you want to be a big guy in the Bitcoin? How much does it cost to be a big guy in the Bitcoin network? What if you want to be in a different network? right? So there's just different networks, but ultimately, yeah, the value is intrinsic, right? It's what someone else believes in. Why also push physical metals, gold, silver? Shit hits the fan, the power goes out, and you walk up to the store and you've got silver in your pocket. People are going to be like, "Sir, what can I do for you?" That's where you want to be at. You want to be in that position. But also being in a self-reliant situation where like you can handle the power being out for 2 or 3 years, maybe freaking enjoy it. Like maybe it's a nice thing. And it doesn't have to be out, right? There's solutions to make power. But I do think that we're going to go through a weird period in time. And so in the Great Depression, trading gold for bread, digital currency will be similar. Yeah, dude, it's going to be different, right? It's not going to be like the old depression of the 30s because we're in a depression. Like that's what people don't want to say. But like mathematically, we're in a depression. Like we've got the unemployment, we've got the lack of GDP, like we're in a depression. We've got the lack of future growth, like we're in it, right? So like, and typically depressions take like 20 years to roll out, 20, 25, depends on what the government does, but we're in it. If they did nothing, I feel like we could be over this period in like 5 years. But if they keep doing what they're doing, Janet Yellen, this is the latest one, that she's doing $370 billion of injection into the banks per month from the Treasury Department. She doesn't need Congress to do that. $370 billion per month. Just to give you guys an idea on where the stock market is right now. We have to date, since the pandemic, have done 120 billion from the Treasury into the financials, into the financial market. We've done other things. Congress has done money spending, but the Treasury itself, up in the ante big time. How much money they're printing into it. They're going to blow the system apart. The system's going to blow apart. That's all I can say. Is like it's probably going to skyrocket, and then like at some point that rocket's just going to explode, and then boom, down, deflation. Gold, silver, it's cheap. Everything's cheap for a moment. Then they, try to move everybody to a digital currency. That thing loses value like freaking crazy. It's taxed like crazy. It's slavery is what it is. Or you can move out to these cryptos and like hard metals, and ultimately that's probably what's going to happen. End of the day. So, anyway, great seeing you guys. I am on Clubhouse. I started a new alias, if you will. It's called Professor Trav. Go on Clubhouse, find me. We're gonna do a Clubhouse this week. Probably gonna start doing Clubhouses like often, like a lot. Like I could see myself doing a Clubhouse a day for sure. But it's a good time where you guys aren't just in the comments, but like we can interact. And to my knowledge, I just listened to an episode on it's like a Clubhouse-like app, but it records it so we can take the content and then keep it so people can really be part of the content. Nonetheless, got a new house going up in a week or two, and there's a big studio on top of that thing, and so there's more content coming. But I'm just in a phase where like I'm getting my food forest good, I'm getting like my property good, getting like my gear, like I'm just getting ready, man, just getting ready because I have a lot of time. I have a lot of time to do content and stuff and hang out. I'm sure. I'm hopeful. But I don't know how much time I have to like stack silver and like get Bitcoin at cheap prices. Like Bitcoin's like people are like, yo, I missed my opportunity on Bitcoin. Are you serious? You guys realize Bitcoin's 90% off, right? Like if you figure out the intrinsic value of Bitcoin, it's 90% off. You didn't miss Bitcoin. Just talking to a kid. Oh, I can't believe I missed it. You missed it, son? You ever known anything for sure is 10x undervalued? And I hope it drops 80% from here. Because historically, it does that every now and then. It drops a little 80, but at the end of the day, this thing 10 years out is going to end up at 500 to a mil easily. And that's just to begin with. That's before the debasement of currency. I mean, but Bitcoin at $1 million is happening before like 2030 for sure. Like it's fact. So anyway, great seeing you guys. Peace.